we can see there's a shortage of cars, so that's driving up the price. But people don't have more money, right? So interesting, on our site, we can see the average price of cars rising, and we can see where the eyeballs are going is actually going to slightly cheaper cars. Now, interesting, we just did some research. More people are expecting to spend more on their next car. They kind of accepted that it is going to be more expensive. But you can't fundamentally change that people don't have more money.
Welcome to the latest episode of the AM News Show podcast. I'm Tom Sharp, News and Features Editor at AM, and I'm joined by Phil Jones, COO at eBay Motors Group, and John O'Hanlon, CEO of Wayland's Automotive. Welcome, guys. Welcome back to both of you into the studio.
Thanks for having us.
Great to see you both. And thanks for being here. I guess I wanted to start off, you're both captives who have been exposed to a lot of AM in recent days, and I wanted to reflect really initially on last week's AM Live Expo at the NEC in Birmingham. I personally was thrilled with how it went. I mean, it's great to see people embracing face-to-face contact again, and there's a real buzz about the hall. And John, you're part of the advisory group that helps organise the event. So I'll come to you first. How did you feel about the event in hindsight?
I think the response was quite incredible. You spoke about the warmth of people meeting again, and it genuinely felt that way. You know, it's a combination. Yeah, people are there to learn, people are there to network, but actually just seeing so many of the old faces and just spending those little 5 minutes here and there is just invaluable, and taking that opportunity was great. But again, some of the speakers you lined up, you know, was fantastic, you know, getting that view of the industry today when so much is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had a great day until the point where I had to crack out the notebook really and start recording everything for the next edition of AM. So that's the challenge I've got now. But no, a great packed day. And you, Phil, how did you find the event?
Yeah, I echo John's thoughts really in terms of it was lovely to see people. I mean, that sort of COVID era, which is sort of now coming out of, you see people that you think you only saw a few months ago and you realise it was 2019. So it was really lovely, and there was definitely a warmth in the room. It was really good to catch up. It took me about an hour to do one lap of the room. I think it's really important, and I guess what I liked seeing with the masterclasses and actually trying to get more people in the rooms, hearing best practice and hearing the insights, because I think as a sector in general, we're always quite busy, and it can often be quite short-termist, and there's still so much change, there's still so much evolution, that I think it's really important for dealers in particular to kind of sit amongst their peer group and hear what's going on, and it is kind of laid up on a plate for you. Very helpful.
Yeah, I think we did talk about this earlier, and I think we've already crunched the numbers at Bauer, and the numbers were ahead of 2019, which was an outstanding result. But I mean, one of the conversations we had before we came on air, I think the theatres need to get bigger, which is perhaps something we didn't anticipate coming quite so soon. But, you know, to get into that room, like you say, and really hear the insight that's given on the day, you know, that's the way the show needs to go, isn't it, I guess? Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what people are there for, really. That's the benefit, and you know, it's paid for by the suppliers like ourselves, kind of sitting around the outside. But things like that are like Disneyland for me. I'm a bit weird like that. Excellent.
But it was a good point, because the number of people you had standing at the back for the presentations was probably double what you had sat down. So I think there is, you know, absolutely a demand for that information. You know, whether that's more so now, I'm not sure, but there was a demand, a need, a desire for that, getting those views, getting those opinions on the way through.
Yeah, great problem for us to have, thankfully. But I mean, clearly appetite for insight, and it's hardly surprising, is it, given the situation we find ourselves in now. I'm getting to that time of the year where I'm starting to ask retailers about 2023, and quite frankly, the answers are all over the place. No one's quite sure. But for you guys at Wayland's, I mean, you're going into 2023 you're constantly reaching new milestones as a group. You're 5 years birthday
years,
has
beginning
just
of the
passed,
month.
and by the time this goes out, we can safely say that you are now in the AM100 as well for the first time.
Which, we're absolutely delighted by. And, sharing that, applaud it around about the group. It's been immensely well received. It is a mark of the scale. And when we set out 5 years ago, we had a 5-year plan that was to get to 100 million turnover, 2 million balance sheet. And we did that within 3. So you then have to go back round again and say, okay, we want to be at 250 million. But this time we put a shorter time scale. And a lot of our challenges, on top of every other challenge, we've been through a lot of growth in terms of the business. Initially, 2018, we moved from that 1 to 4, one brand with Volvo. But the last 2 years, we've now grown and brought on another 5 sites, another 2 brands. And that all comes with challenges to the organisation. And we've worked really hard to get to know those brands, to get to understand how they work, to get to know the new areas that we're working in. And some of them was new to me. I'd never worked in Bristol. In that area. So again, it's understanding those areas. So a lot of our challenges has been not only taking on what's happening in the market, it's also making sure, internally, we are as strong and as slick and as efficient as we can be.
Well, we'll get on to it in a short while. I was hoping we might have Barry Judge on from eBay Motors today, who's just joined us as CEO. Because I was keen, and I may well ask Phil about it as well. I was keen to ask about the startup culture, I guess, and Barry comes very much from that background, and it's unusual to see a startup in the franchise car retail sector, and I guess that's exactly what you've done with Wayland's in a sense. Does that give you an advantage starting from scratch? You've got no legacy systems and things. You've been able to come in. Software is new, marketing techniques are new, and the staff are fresh and open to new ideas.
But if you know how we operate, I'm afraid a lot of the systems we use, a lot of the marketing we use, a lot of the people that are part of the journey are a lot of the same people that I knew previously. So that's one of the strengths, is we've got a consistent and we've got a strong and we've got an established performance. What we've been able to do is choose the brands that we want to work with, and that's clearly been based around the things that are important to me, whether that's comfort, safety, electrification. So that's been the areas we've been able to make the big choice. And again, then build on that. And you're quite right. We can be more fleet of foot as a smaller organisation. We can look to where we want to establish a footprint. We don't have those legacy issues coming through. And that's the part that's exciting for me. Because looking back, I guess it's 6 years ago when, what do I do next? Do I go and work in a bigger group? Do I want to work? And I wanted to work on my own. I wanted to create a business that myself and the team could be proud of, working with great partners in great areas. And so far, so good.
I think John undersells it as well, because having sort of known John from the start of that journey, there has been very deliberate kind of decisions, like bets placed really in terms of the future, and being able to be kind of slightly more flexible in the approach and know where the sector's going and kind of knowing what the product's kind of rollout's going to be. You can anticipate that, right? And it's really hard. We could keep talking about unprecedented change, but I think it is really hard when you've got a legacy and trying to evolve with that. I think it's quite refreshing, right, to see in a time when pressures have been harder than ever. Actually, see Wayland's kind of knocking down and rebuilding dealerships and the such like. They look really impressive.
I was about to say, you look at John's LinkedIn feed at the moment, and it does start to look more like a property developer than a car retailer. What have you got? What are the projects you've got going at the moment? How close are they to fruition now?
Well, Swindon is, I think that's one you're closest to.
Yeah, I'd appreciate you for getting that one finished.
Yeah, I would say. I think so with the teams down in Swindon. And that's our biggest spend so far. and it wouldn't be Plan A to actually knock down the the dealership, but it was a 1970s dealership with lots of grass and greenery, and it was up and down like a fiddler's elbow. So we're having to spend a lot of money just on the groundworks. But what we'll end up with is a really stunning environment. And Swindon is a big market. Behind Bristol is our biggest market. So actually having a 2-acre site, we'll be approaching 80 used car display there. A fully VRE, the Volvo retail environment. It will be, and it's on one of the busiest roads in and out of Reading. So there'll be a statement property for us, and that looks great. We've then got to do some work with Kia and take through their corporate identity, but that's not as expensive as some of the money we've spent. And I guess that's for Volvo. We've now done 4. This will be the 5th, so this will be the final. And every one of those, everyone's been multi-million in terms of the investment. So yeah, unashamedly, we have been spending a lot of money in and around property. But that's important. If we want environments that our customers want to come to, we want environments that our teams want to work in, and it's the same back of house as front of house, and that's something that's really important to me. It's not about dressing up the front for the customer. It's got to be throughout. But I think you can demonstrate, you make the investments in the right places, you can get the return, and that's what we're working really hard on.
Mm. I think Phil touched on there that there are strategic decisions that have obviously been made well in advance. I was with a retailer yesterday who's looking to perhaps add new franchises, expand. And, you look at the market, it's a difficult time to do it. And one of the particular questions that he had for me, God help him if he has to ask me for advice, but, there's all these Chinese brands now coming into the market. In a sense, you've got in on, the MG were on the front foot, so you've got a feel for that already. But, a lot of being a franchise car retailer and setting up as you've done is backing the right horses. That's what he was saying to me. With all these brands coming in, there's opportunity, but who do you back? I mean, is that still something you're analysing all the time?
No, and of course we do. Yeah. And you look at some of the big movements that people talk about, the ACEs, and the big one that really has come to fruition, less than subscription even, which was going to be the next big thing, is electrification. I think the autonomous and the connectivity is arriving, and it's arriving across the board. But in terms of electrification, that was the key part for me. So I wanted brands that would have a presence round about electric, and brands I felt I could work with. I want to work with brands who still want to work strongly with retailers. And I think where I am today, I'm really happy where I am today. All 3 brands will grow significantly again next year, and all 3 brands represent a different part of the market. Albeit there's a little bit more of a clash than I was expecting around about a couple of the brands, but those are great challenges. And that for me, the Chinese are coming. Of course, don't forget Volvo does have a significant Chinese share, and a lot of the parts components do come from China. So I think in terms of our exposure to Far East as a company, is huge, but I think it's the right place to be today, in the same way as the Germans brands were absolutely the right place for Ridgeway as it was back then to be.
Ready for a taste of agency? We're interested to see how that will affect the AM100 next year.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to cope with that. Whereas brands or dealer groups don't have as much turnover. Purely because they won't have new car sales per se. Do you try to create a number for them on the way through? But I'll leave that to you. An agency is arriving. And I think we've just got to be aware of it and how we work best with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge challenges for you as well, Phil, I guess. And we've touched on that sort of startup culture and that momentum. eBay Motors sort of came into the form that we see it now at a time where I mean, we were getting quite excited about, the various market entrants. So, how hard are you still having to push? I guess Barry shows how hard you're still having to push to evolve and stay relevant.
So one of the things that not everyone might be aware of, we now have private equity owners. So, embarrassingly, I'm on my fifth owner, kind of in effectively the same job.
I'd say that's a good thing, Phil.
I think it's a good thing that the owners have left before I have, really. And it's fascinating because obviously we were acquired as Motorstock.co.uk by eBay in 2019. We merged that with Gumtree and eBay, and actually it's been phenomenally successful. The volume of response and eyeballs that Gumtree and eBay get, adding to sort of the speciality of Motorstock.co.uk and the tools and the such like, it's been really, really effective. And we deliver hundreds of thousands of leads every month, and it's a proper business, right? And it's fascinating as a business going through that cultural shift from kind of the eBay ownership, as it was last year, into private equity ownership. It's quite refreshing, and kind of always be careful what we wish for in terms of kind of lords and masters. But we've now got owners who are taking a very different view. So we're in a corporate world, it's kind of a sort of a broadly longer term strategic kind of play, and you're fitting with other geographic markets, and sort of you're looking for overlap and kind of crossover. Whereas now we've got private equity owners who are going, right, we've got a valuable motors business. There is a need for a compelling alternative. How do we kind of, roll up our sleeves and become much more effective? And obviously, as an executor, that makes you very busy. But the need for dealers to attract consumers and get their cars exposed online is as great as it's ever been. The need to help consumers work through the market and get down to the right car and the right dealer, I think is as important. And in particular, as you start talking about electrification and you start talking about the cost of living crisis, actually classified sites play quite a role in helping people work out what they're going to go and spend their money on. Because it is really interesting. It's not just a case of cost of living means people are looking for cheaper cars. People are considering electric. They're considering kind of, would they think about subscribing? Do they always need a car? Do they need one car rather than two cars? Do they need a smaller car rather than a bigger car? And all this kind of plays in. And, in not only in automotive, in, property and jobs, that's why classifieds exist, which is to take all this choice that's in the market and help the consumer kind of navigate through that, and then hopefully end up at the right point. And I think that's when, we land a consumer into the dealer's sort of environment, either their website or kind of speaking to an agent. That's when the dealer really needs to take over and maybe go a little bit deeper with the consumer about, right, what is it you need? You've come to us. We can help get you a car, but what is it you need? And then try and build that relationship rather than just take the lead and kind of put it through the conveyor belt and and sell someone a car. So it's really exciting times, and there's lots of challenges out there. I'm pretty kind of bullish for the future for our business because we've got these established platforms. And I think there's plenty of opportunities that we can execute on, and it's been quite fun. But it's going to be tough next year. We can see that with the economy in general. But even today, I would say we're at a volume of used car transactions which reflects like the underlying level of used car transactions, and there will always be those transactions. He's just being sharp and adept as to kind of responding to the opportunities, I think.
Well, I guess the one thing that we keep talking about is this consumer demand versus supply issue, and that loss of 2 million cars to the UK market is a huge chunk. So I keep being told there is, while the demand, even if the demand has slackened, whether people's interest in cars will slacken is a different matter. So you may still get the visitors. The prices are going to remain largely untouched, you would think, because people will still need to buy cars through necessity or desire.
It's really interesting when you've got these kind of two opposing forces. So kind of demand, as it were, for kind of the used car sites, let's say roughly down 15% year on year, and so is the transactions in used. But you've still got something like 75-80% of people, when they're buying a car because they have to. It's the right time for them, etc. It's not because they're just feeling like full of cash and want to go and so that people fundamentally need to change car. But we can see there's a shortage of cars, so that's driving up the price. But people don't have more money, right? So it's interesting, on our site, we can see the average price of cars rising, and we can see where the eyeballs are going is actually going to slightly cheaper cars. Now, interesting, we just did some research. More people are expecting to spend more on their next car. They kind of accepted that it is going to be more expensive. But you can't fundamentally change that people don't have more money. And so people are then having to be smart about that. And that doesn't mean the end of kind of younger cars. It just means maybe the new buyer is going into a 1-year-old car. It could even be that someone who's in a 5 or 6-year-old car is going from being a cash purchase into a PCP or thinking about electric. So there's so much kind of movement in it. There's definite opportunity, but it's being flexible and agile with that.
Right, so it's a difficult time to talk about it with interest rates going up, but it seems clear that, I guess, if it's possible, an increasing number of car buyers are going to be leveraging finance to try and get into a new car, and making that affordable is essential for the sector. How is eBay Motors integrating that finance journey into the car buying process?
Yeah, so we on Motors.co.uk, we have some of our dealers have a finance calculator via iVending. We're able to pull in kind of their lending prices, and then for those dealers who don't want to pay for that privilege, we have a kind of a broker option, and the volume going through the broker option is really interesting. We basically saw a real uptick between July and August, as I think people are going from being the cash buyer to considering being a finance buyer. Now, I don't know how long that kind of path is, because I think there comes a point where interest rates keep going up that it pushes it the other way. But there's still fundamentally a need for transactions. So I think people are worried. People are very nervous about surprise costs. So another piece of research we did at the moment, only 6% of people would be willing to kind of sacrifice the warranty on the vehicle. So it's really important to kind of scratch the layer of kind of what's going on here, because it's not just a case of, oh, right, let's switch into finance, but because the lenders themselves are doing fairly crazy things and being more risk averse and the such like. The important thing is to understand your consumer and be able to have decent conversations with them and make sure you've got the solution that goes through there.
Absolutely. Is that something you're doing at Wayland's? I guess you're thinking how to market to a customer that's short
and
of cash.
I think all the points Phil's making, are absolutely spot on. A used car is a necessity purchase, and maybe as an industry we were really good at moving some of those used car buyers into new cars. But as you're seeing, I spotted that they were looking at the average cost for finance, and it's up £100 a month in only 12 months. And that's really before a lot more of the APR increases have kicked in, and there's more coming through, and we can see that those are being passed on. So it is becoming more difficult. I think the good news is there doesn't seem to be there's a level of consistency around about the market, and I don't expect to see a shock in used car pricing. It looks like it's gone back more to normal. It is great to hear that customers, because that was the first time someone's came out, other classified suppliers, were saying that people weren't looking to spend less. They were looking to spend the same, but maybe they were looking at older cars, and your research actually demonstrated that people were looking to spend a little bit more. But it is going to be challenging, and we've got to find the ways of making sure if someone's in the market, we're giving the most compelling offer we can. We can't set interest rates, and a lot of our flexibility has been used up in trying to control some of that. But I think there is an expectation. People are more aware that used cars have got more expensive, and interest rates, everyone can see it, whether it's your mortgage or your car or other parts of your life. Things have got more expensive, and there's not going to be a magic solution to that. I don't think any brand or any dealer group will have a magic answer. We've just got to make sure that we are finding the right solution for every single consumer, and it's almost that bespoke offer, that we can give, and that's having the experts available to make sure we can do that is the key.
Yeah, as I say, I think on top of that as well, as businesses, we all have to be kind of as efficient as possible, and that doesn't mean kind of swaths of cost savings. It just means you need to be optimized for what you think the next 6 months to a year looks like, and be really honest with that, because there's not going to be a flood of cars coming back into the market. Demand will be suppressed next year. I personally, I don't think it will be as bad as we're kind of preparing ourselves for, but it certainly isn't going to be kind of magically better. So you need to be optimized for now rather than for what you used to be. I think is really important.
I think it is a really interesting point, because there does seem to be a little bit of pushback round about some of the governor of the Bank of England's view, and was that a signal to the market? But absolutely, interest rates are going to be more expensive. We saw the latest inflation figures. Everything is more expensive, and this is before. And sorry about to drop this in because I know you hate it. Tomorrow we've got the Chancellor's statement. Which we haven't seen as yet, but we do know they've been signalling again that it's increased taxes. So it will be a squeeze, and it will be tighter. And we can control some of our costs, but if you look at whether it's property or whether it's people, a lot of those costs are locked in as they can be. So it's about making sure that we are exploiting, taking advantage, making sure that we sell everything we can that's applicable to every customer, and that's going to be the trick that sees us through.
You talked at Live about sort of stocking disciplines and how previous. I was listening, you see. How previously through COVID, obviously people have been hanging on to cars and they've been appreciating. We can't do that anymore. How are you going to maintain that in a market which is short of stock and may well be short of consumer demand in the year ahead?
I think the clever part that we do is we don't force a sale. And we don't even force a write down in the books. We provide. So as the car's getting older, we are providing more against it, but it still leaves the choice of whether that car's the right car in the general manager and the sales manager's hands. So you've still got that level of entrepreneurship actually in the shop, in the site today. So if they think it's the right car, that's great. Keep with it. But as a group, we're protected, because as that car gets older, we're getting a bigger provision against it. So it's not rocket science, but I think it allows the dealership to stay as focused on what they believe is the right stock at the right time. And it takes away from, I've got a 45 or a 60-day liquidation policy, which might drive the wrong behaviours on cars that you spend a lot of money to get hold of, a lot of money to prepare, have on the front, and then to actually then trade them out as expensive. So I think having that discipline and maintaining that discipline hopefully gives us the output, the return, the turn that keeps us fresh and keeps enjoying the returns on the investment for used cars.
I know that's data that you guys look at eBay Motors as well, isn't it? The stock turn and the stocking levels.
Yeah.
What are we expecting for the year ahead?
So, one of the interesting things we've seen sort of throughout kind of all the kind of the various unprecedented times, which is now precedented, is that actually the dealers have actually responded generally pretty well. So we're now back to days in stock is actually slightly lower than it was in 2019. So people actually have got, I think, more efficient as businesses, and that kind of goes to the trading on the here and now. So I think days in stock will continue to be quite efficient next year. I think people will have to be. We hear a lot of noise from our customers about the cost of prep costs and this sort of balance between I want to sell younger kind of fresh cars, but I can't get enough of them, to there's older cars, but they cost much more to prep and have bigger service issues. And we've seen a few people kind of flitting between those things. But in general, people are quite efficient. I think the challenges for next year will continue to be lack of supply and knowing which kind of part to take you in, and then just balancing against that operational costs, electricity bills, rising costs of prep, and being able to source cars. So yeah, everyone's got to kind of be even more on their game and just make sure you've got the best business you can have, really.
I wanted to ask you a little bit. Well, it's not a difficult subject to pluck out the air, is it? EVs. We've had all sorts of conversations in this room about EVs in the past, but one of the stock sourcing providers in the sector recently described EVs as the hottest ticket in town after the SMMT came out with their Q3 sales results. But I've recently spoken to Darren Martin at CAP HPI as well. This is the most depreciating segment of the market at the moment in used cars. And also, it's the market that OEMs are prioritising their production levels. It goes to follow that if they're the cars coming into the market, they'll be the cars that are gradually in more and more supply, and the prices will come down more and more. So it's a flip sort of side. From a consumer point of view, they're going to become more affordable. From a car retailer point of view, do they need to be very astute on what they stock and
I
how
think
quickly
there's
sell
kind
it?
of challenges. So there's I would say, in general, consumers are very open to electric and would love their next car to be electric. The reality is, I think you end up with a slightly sort of two-state economy, really, which is those who can afford to go electric. So, and I have these conversations with sort of friends in the pub and such like. It is more expensive to get in there. There are cost savings and such like, but it is typically targeting that new car or kind of someone buying under 3 years. It's that segment. The person who's probably buying a 5 to 10-year-old car, EV is not really quite there. So when you're looking at kind of those younger cars, EV absolutely plays a big role to play, and you can see that in the registrations data because it's a rising share. But then when you look at the percentage of ad views, the percentage of cars on our site that are EVs, it's really, really low. And actually, I can see why the depreciation is flowing through as well, because whilst there is an appetite for EVs, the technology is getting better. So to buy a 3-year-old EV is not. You're not going to get the same range as you would do from a 1-year-old. So again, we get a lot of data that tells us people want their next car to be an EV, but the cost of that ownership is different. We saw something in our survey recently, which is a bit of a shift from it being kind of cost. It's now predominantly environmental or kind of sort of social concerns, because actually the cost difference is sort of like it's degrading. It still is a cost saving, but I look at my smart meter when I'm charging my car. You have to segment it. So I think it's a real challenge. There's kind of a new younger car market, and then the used car I think will be challenged. But again, it goes to the dealers really being able to have informative conversations with their consumers, with their customers around what is the right car for them at that time. And when you're buying that car, you're not necessarily going to have it for the next 20 years. And be open with them, and then keep the relationship going for the time when maybe the stock is available.
I think what dawned on me during these conversations I've had recently is perhaps that the franchise retailer will remain very much on the front foot. If you're an independent looking to stock your forecourt, you might be a little bit more cautious about a depreciating EV.
Well, someone used to tell me about the sin of the single indicator, and I think you've just got to be. You've just got to be more aware. There will be months. And I think you've got a combination of factors that have hit, especially around about electric used prices. Part of that is issues energy prices stay high, consistently high. It's almost factored in to the residual. But you've also had, some more supply and significantly more supply around certain models. And those models are all quite similar in terms of their colour and their spec. I'll let you work out exactly who it is. And that's had a shift. So it doesn't take a lot for the market to react when it's not a big part of the market. On the other side of the coin, it's lift station. We are electrifying our the future of cars. So you can put it off, you can delay, you can procrastinate, but it is arriving. And one of the reasons we launched Wayland's E was just to make sure that we.
I was going to prompt you on that.
Just in case. It was to learn more and to understand more about it. And it's really interesting because some of the cars that we thought would be absolute winners, whether it's Tesla or ID, we've had a lot more demand, a lot more success around some of those slightly older cars that are slightly cheaper, but they don't have the same range, they don't have a lot of the tech that the very newest cars have, but that's people looking for an electric solution to their lives, whether it be hybrid or fully electric. So that's giving us that little insight, and so far so good. We're really delighted with the numbers that we're getting from the limited stock that we've got. So really, really pleased with it so far.
How many vehicles are you managing to stock there? And
so it's about 20.
Okay.
And actually, we're seeing that stock turn of 8. So we're really, really pleased with it, because you forget. And I know I shouldn't, because when you get a new franchise, you then got to set up and running. And of course, we've created a new franchise for ourselves. So you then got to set up the digital channels, you got to set up your website, you got to do all those bits and pieces. So that's all done now, and suddenly we're seeing it accelerate. And, with 20, we get through those sort of 15, 16, so that's your sort of 3-4 a week. Yeah, and suddenly you're getting it. And I think as we build that experience and that expertise, then we'll continue to expand it.
How have you gone about sort of installing staff in there? Because I guess it's one thing focusing on very new EVs from a particular brand, and you've had the manufacturer training. When you're presented with an array of stock to sell, suddenly you need to have a widespread knowledge of the EV sector.
No, and again, we do staff it slightly differently. So we do have more product genius there who can actually take the time to actually learn more around about all the new product, and then have the time to actually talk to the customers round about the new product. I would be failing if I don't mention EVA and then FDA program, which we get all our sites signed up as soon as we can. Usually the drain on that is not the staff or the team's commitment. It's more around about getting the charger, charging capability onto site. And we're working really hard. We're going to spend 7 figures on that across the group. So I think actually having a focus really helps. There's nothing they're frightened of, and there's never been a better time. Same way a customer can research a car, we can research a car, and we're not finding the problems, because electric cars generally are more straightforward. There's an odd software issue, but in terms of the mechanics, it doesn't leave you as exposed to running as you would even if you're running a multi-franchise ICE site rather than an EV site.
So we can hear how Wayland is continuing to evolve and diversify, I guess. What are eBay Motors' priorities in the months to come? Because you've had this leadership sort of reshuffle. Barry's come in, you've changed title. So I guess that's part of a bringing together of the brands, or will they remain quite diverse?
So I think the number one job is doing what we need to do all day, every day, which is connect millions of car buyers with car dealers at great value. That is the fundamental job. And I say kind of to business sort of efficiency, that remains the absolute focus of getting our bare essentials right, helping dealers get their stock onto the site quickly, giving them as smooth a journey as possible, communicating the value that's generated. So that's kind of from a dealer perspective. Some of it is sort of basics, and this comes from focus. And actually, with new ownership, you ask yourself some tough and honest questions, and that's really refreshing, because it allows us to roll our sleeves up and kind of get in. And then with our brands, you've got Motorstock.uk, which is kind of the vertical pure play, and that's growing really well. We know it performs and converts really effectively. So we're sort of playing around with different marketing channels to make sure we're kind of driving as much response to that. And then we've got an open goal in terms of things we can do around improving the conversion, helping consumers understand the different types of cars, helping dealers retail their messages and the such like. So much is kind of going on. It's actually sometimes just really hard to put it onto a small mobile screen, which is how everyone sort of searches for the internet. There's a lot of thinking and a lot of science that goes behind there. And then actually with Gumtree, which is kind of our sister company, phenomenal amount of traffic, plays a slightly different sector to franchise, but you'd be amazed. It's kind of like ITV. Lots of rich people watch ITV, and it just has a big audience. It has a really kind of metropolitan audience, a lot of kind of young families, which is prime kind of car buying territory. So we work closely with the Gumtree team to make sure they're kind of adjusting to our needs, and then kind of like the eBay, which is a long-term, effectively commercial partnership, but absolutely part of the fold, and just has huge amounts of traffic and just benefits from the kind of the momentum that it has. And eBay as a site kind of did really well as people shifted to online buying through COVID and such like, and we've seen that translate in our statistics as well. And what we're doing, because we're focusing on car dealers, is we're feeding that back into eBay to say, you might want to think about this, you might want to think about that. Obviously, we'll be able to do more on motors.co.uk, but that's where we get the proven winners and then take it back to the network. But it allows you to hit a large audience across multiple sites and catch people at different stages of the car buying process. So we've kind of got lots of flypaper out there trying to grab the car buyers that we can take to the dealer. So when you layer on top, one of the things we struggle with as a classified site to get ahead of is EVs, because you go onto a classified site and you sort of search by price and you're doing price filters. I really think that the sector, not just our site but other sites as well, have a real job to help consumers break down their budgetary requirements and what they need. And I also think that classified sites in general help you identify the right car, not necessarily the right dealer. So those are things we know if we can try and get that right, it will come good because it will be generating more response. So yeah, it's kind of indigestion rather than starvation in terms of opportunity. But yeah, it's good fun.
Reading between the lines, and I don't want to blow any secrets that perhaps aren't secrets if you're talking about it on a podcast with us, but is there a cost of ownership, metric to be had rather than a value search?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Consumers don't like to hear about total cost of ownership. Certainly when they're in buying mode.
Yes.
It's so relevant now, though, isn't it? Hugely relevant.
And we've done this throughout the years and we've played around with it. So it's finding a way of communicating that back to the customer. So I think Amazon does this really well in general. Like, people who looked at this also looked at this. Yeah. It's that type of insight. So, someone's searching for, a £15,000 Golf, or if you can still buy one for that. And what they're really telling you actually they're willing to spend £300 to £400 a month potentially on a kind of a hatchback, and there's lots of options there. So again, taking all that data and trying to move that around is hard, especially on a small screen. As I say, you're trying to get someone moving through the site really, really quickly. So
I think it is a great point, and I think actually you're right in terms of it's when customers are in the buying mode. Again, it helps them make the decision to make a switch. If they get over the fact that actually it does drive differently. You're going to face some challenge around about charging if you're not at home. Actually being able to demonstrate that you will get a saving over a certain period. So we're just about to bring on a calculator onto the website to help that, and that's as much for our own teams as for the customer. So if we're actually having the discussions, let's use this and spin it around.
And the sentiment for the consumers, they want to go to EV. So, and I think people feel a society pressure to do so. It's then, translating that and helping the consumer understand it, because the numbers and the calculations are different.
I mean, and I think, again, a lot of new is driven by the tax benefits, where it's salary sacrifice, where it's company car, it's quite strong incentives to have an EV. It becomes more difficult on used when you're starting off with a higher price. So that's where it's incumbent upon us to actually allow the customer to make the right decision in terms of, socially, by actually demonstrating that actually it's not going to cost any more if we can do this, this and this. And I think that's important, that we are as educated as possible so we can help the customer on the way through.
I get the impression that, if consumers were open to searching by cost of ownership as opposed to list price, it makes the market more agnostic at a time where you've got petrol, diesel, EV, hybrid subscription like that offered by Volvo. You guys are dealing with that. If you've got that cost of ownership, suddenly everything's in the mix, and it might just be the best solution for that consumer rather than them thinking, that's what I want.
But we've trained our customers over many years to search in a certain way. But you're right. If we can engineer that, if we can introduce that, then that would be fantastic. But there's a lot. That's an oil tanker that you're going to have to turn.
Yeah, and actually, I think unfortunately, if you do total cost of ownership, you'll probably never want to buy a car. Yeah, so it is carefully explaining that to the consumer on that thing, because there is an element of what's, let's say, 3/4 of people are changing the car because they sort of need to. And 25% or something said that they were doing it because they felt they needed a change. I think there's still an excitement that comes from it. Yes, people are kind of nervous about buying, and you can't lose that, because that's probably the thing that pushes someone over the edge from, I think I want a new car, to, well, actually, this is nice, and I've gone to a dealership and I've had a really nice feeling. Now I've got this new car and kind of playing around with things. We still, as an industry, are trying to sell something, so we've got to kind of make sure we don't talk people out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, going into next year, I guess someone was asking me before, why would you go into franchise now? But I'm sort of thinking the shortage of used cars. Why wouldn't you go into franchise? This, it still looks like a very stable proposition. But how much of what you're doing now is dependent on that return of supply next year?
Not as much. I think because looking at our franchise partners, they're all expecting to have more supply available. I think some of what's happening in China in terms of the easing off of the complete lockdowns under COVID will help in terms of components and semiconductors and batteries. So I think there's more room for optimism, because if you'd asked me this time last year, I said, 6 months, I'll be fine. I think the year before that, I said the same. But it does feel now that there is more momentum, but as a business, we've never been predicated on purely new cars. We've got a good used car business, we've got a good after sales business. We still make money from finance and insurance. So I think we're a balanced ticket. We could be doing a little bit more roundabout corporate and fleet, but right now we are a retail focused business. So no, I'm not concerned that we're franchise retailers, and I think actually it's got a little bit tougher for some of the bigger used car supermarkets. They've found it a little bit harder more recently. So we are where we are. We've got what we've got, and I'm still confident about next year. We know in terms of our order banks, we've got strong order banks that will see us well into next year. On delivery, used cars, we've got more consistency. We know it's going to be short. So we've just got to keep doing what we're doing in terms of the great focus that we've got on it. And after sales could be better because we had a boom year when we came out. Of course, this year's been a little bit harder because you've not had a lot of those major services, but people are doing more miles again. So we should be looking at more of the major services and still being great around those basics of EVHC. So now I'm still confident about the top of the funnel. It's just the one thing we can be sure of is going to cost more to run the businesses, and a lot of those costs are locked in.
It's been such a fast-moving journey for Wayland's. What can we expect to see by the end of 23? What will it look like?
It's not going to be too much more exciting. There will be a little bit more excitement. Hopefully we can talk about soon. But I'm looking for more consistency of what we've got, and to make that as good as possible. Yes, you can grow via acquisition, but the biggest part, the most profitable part, is to grow organically with what you've got. And, we want to dominate our areas in the sectors that we represent. And that's always a challenge. That's always where we set the eye line. And we've still got a lot of work to do. We've got some good businesses. We need to make everyone a great business. So that's where our focus, that's where our attention is going to be over the next 12 months.
Great stuff. Phil, now you've got your new funding and your new leadership team lined up. What's the next 12 months hold? You don't have to give me all your secrets.
Yeah, no,
some insight would be great.
If they were only secrets. I think it's focusing on fundamentals. And then my advice is the same for dealers, right? It's be the best business you can be, and make sure you're as prepared, because it isn't going to be easy, but there's still lots of opportunity out there. And for us, that's kind of, some of that's focusing on the basics and making sure we're doing what we can to kind of connect car buyers with car dealers cost effectively, and with all the supporting sort of services that go around it. But there are definitely pockets of opportunity, and it's listening to the market and it's responding and being adept.
Excellent. Guys, thanks ever so much for coming back into the Armchair studio and being part of the AM podcast. It's great to have you back on. First time for you on the AM podcast, so I'm sure we'll have you back at some point, Phil.
Brilliant. No, thanks for having me,
hopefully
Tom.
with Barry as well.
Definitely in the new year, yeah.
Thanks ever so much for your time.
Tom.